Hey everybody, it's Quantum here. It is Monday at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. I just came back from a trip and will be returning to work tomorrow. But before I do, I wanted to give a quick update on a MarketWatch video because we just had the DLC Disney LORCANA Challenge Bokum that just concluded over this weekend. We saw Ruby Amethyst in the finals going up in the mirror match, and obviously Ruby Amethyst taking the event. What implications does that have on the meta and on the market? And of course, we had our first weekend in July where store set championships happen. So if you participated in those, congratulations. But I want to jump in and take a look at some of the more relevant cards here, where they're going. And this video is going to be a little bit of a flex video because a number of these cards I called in older market watches, that if you go back and watch my older market watch videos, not that I think anybody's really going to do that, but we did quote, and if you've been watching them or keeping up with them or my YouTube posts, you know I've shouted out multiple times like, oh, Sisus were $1, Flynn Riders were $2.50, you know, Curse Merfolks were like 99 cents. These cards have all gone up dramatically, and so if you got them, you know, ahead of the curve before they became kind of included in these meta decks and solidified in the meta, you would have come out ahead. And I don't think I've really had too many losses. The main one that comes to mind is Jafar, the Striking Illusionist, where I said that card should settle around 25-30 Canadian, and I think it's like $10 Canadian. So that one I did lose out on. I do think that card can potentially become good over time, and I would pick up a playset if you don't have it, but that's neither here nor there for this video. So let's go ahead and jump straight in. Sorry for that long intro. To start off, of course, like I mentioned, the Sisu Emboldened Warrior. There's no way in heck this card is worth 1482 USD. This is probably a foil version. Sorry. Near mint. Nope, that's a regular version. There's no way, right? Holy. Okay, well, a foil version's down here for 12. This card is on buyout mode though. That's kind of crazy. I have like 10 copies of these because I picked up 4 regular ones for $1, like I mentioned, and then I ended up pulling I think 3 from my box, and then I bought another like 2 for like $1.50. Regardless though, yeah, this card is pretty much a standard 3-cost card in Ruby decks right now, because on curve, an inkable 3-cost card that's a 1/4 body, you know, the 4 willpower here is really significant. Quest for 2. But when you drop this on curve on 3, this is a 5/4, 4/4 body at least. And then even into the late game, this card can still be a decent, you know, 3/4, 4/4 body. And again, it quests for 2. And so it is pretty hard to out. You know, a Mim Fox does take care of it, but it likely trades out at least with the Mim Fox. Otherwise, your opponent is likely throwing multiple things into it. It doesn't die to things like grab your swords or babooms. Straight up, they need to do extra damage to it. Very good card overall. It might get power corrupt in the next set, but it looks to be a solid option. And of course, one of the main reasons this is so powerful and why it's worth so much is because it combos very nicely in Ruby Amethyst, which we're, like I said, seeing as a meta contending deck. It just won the Bokum DLC, but it pairs well with the Flynn Rider Frenemy, right? You drop Flynn Rider on 2, this on 3, unless your opponent has a direct counter to take out the Flynn Rider or put their own Sisu and Emboldened Warrior on board when they are on the play, so that you have the extra card being on the draw, you will be gaining that 3 lore off Flynn Rider Frenemy. Speaking of which, this is another one here. We've seen this card dramatically increase in price. So again, like I mentioned, I think I still have the YouTube post on my community page where I said I picked up 4 copies of these for $2.50 each or $2.40 each or something, right? Because again, in testing, we know these cards are going to become meta. So if you keep up with the channel, again, you know that you should have picked these up early. I tested this out in Pixelborn before the set was even released, and I was testing it in Amber Ruby, and I was like, this card is crazy. It was really good in that set and that deck, sorry, and I just knew it would be good with like Ruby Amethyst, of course, because again you have like Mim Fox, Goats, Maui's, the same kind of stuff. Well, not same, but like similar stuff that you do in the Ruby version, the Amber version of Ruby decks too. So well, not the Amethyst cards obviously, but like the Maui's and like, you know, Madame Medusa's, Maleficent Dragons, if you're playing that, which you're not in the Ruby Amethyst deck, but that's beside the point. Regardless, it's a good card, and we see this card spiking up for that reason. It synergizes very well with the high strength Ruby cards, and it's a way that you combat aggro. It demands an answer, and so it can also throw off your opponent's tempo. I've talked about this before, where basically, you know, if you're on the play or even on the draw and you drop this, if your opponent had a setup play for the 3rd turn or their second turn, they likely have to mitigate that play now and setting up their board, and they have to deal with this card, because if they don't have a character to put on board to match or exceed the strength of what you have on board or what you will have on board, this card is going to make you gain a lot of lore very quickly, and in the end game that can make all the difference in winning the game. So very, very good card. We're seeing that go up quite a bit. As far as will it continue to increase, I do think it comes back down. I think the card is right now overrated. Obviously, it's very good. It's played in the meta decks, so like it's going to be worth money. But I do think over time it comes down because again, we're bound to get even more very efficient removal, right? And what are the things that are most susceptible to removal? Low strength, low willpower cards, like that Flynn Rider frenemy. So keep that in mind. It might still be very, very strong, you know, but I do think it's a little overpriced now, a little bit overhyped, so it probably will come down. One card that I think is a great value at $1 is King Undisputed. This is one of two of the action songs that we got from this set, the other one being We Don't Talk About Bruno, that I think are grossly undervalued right now. So again, I'm calling this out early, where I think if you can pick these up for $1, I don't know. I have 2 foil ones and I have 5 non-foils. I might pick up a couple more non-foils at $1 each because I really do think this card is extremely strong, and I don't see this getting power crept directly right away. Like we're seeing in Ruby Amethyst, this card being played with the Lady Tremaine and Luca's build, which is, I believe, what the second place Ruby Amethyst player, that he was playing the exact same build as Luca did in that 10K CCS show, that was playing both King Undisputed and Lady Tremaine. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's what I saw when I just was checking through the deck list during my trip over the weekend. But yeah, this card is just very efficient. Like where this is in the meta right now, where you have Sapphire decks pushing that you know threshold of being top tier, this card helps you deal with big threats like the Tamatoa when they only drop that on the turn. This card with the Lady Tremaine, you know, this card being able to be sung, so you can like drop Tremaine, sing this song to out 2 threats on board. We can get that, can get around things like Bucky's Ward. You know, it's just a very powerful, very efficient card, especially in Ruby Amethyst, where you play very efficient 4-drop characters like Merlin Goat and Merlin Rabbit. So as we get better 4-cost characters, and I doubt we get better, more efficient removal than this. Like, yes, it's an uninkable song, but it's very efficient. This card just gets better as we get more 4-cost characters, right? Especially in Ruby and decks that pair well with Ruby, or your colors that pair well with Ruby. And so this is the logic that like I've kind of applied here, right? And you look at a card as a standalone and you're like, okay, why is it good? Well, it's a song, so it can be sung by anything with 4 or more cost. What decks play good 4-cost characters, right? I mean, I know Sapphire plays Hiram, but again, we've talked about you don't want to sing with Hiram. Singing this in Amethyst decks makes a lot of sense. We'll probably get good 4-cost Ruby cards too down the line, so you know, all the more reason at $1. I mean, how can you go wrong, right? This card might end up being worth $4 $5 long term, kind of like what you saw happen to Madame Medusa, kind of like what you saw happen to Cursed Merfolk when I called those out as well back then in those sets. Oh, this is a good one. Do you guys remember? For those of you who are longtime viewers of the channel, like I said, this is going to be a little bit of a flex video, so don't hate me for for gloating a little bit here. Do you remember when I called out buying these at like $5? Do you remember that? When I said I don't see this card going any lower than this. If you don't have it, pick it up now because it's literally one of the most powerful cards in the game. And what did we see this past weekend in Bochum? And what did you see with this price card with the price of this card right now? This is like my crowning achievement for Market Watch calls. I literally called this at the low point and I said, guys, like if you don't have your castles, like pick this card up because like 4 inkable only costs 1 to move here and it gains you 2 lore and has 7 willpower. That in and of itself is insane. And then you draw cards for each character you have here. This single card can single-handedly beat discard decks, right? Like I hope you guys, well, if you tested, you know, right? Yes, it does require certain setups, and yes, you need to get to the ink and have the characters and have the castle and everything. But in certain situations, you put this on board. If they don't have a direct answer and you start moving stuff to it and it can survive, like this card will outdraw the discard for sure, right? So in and of itself, like that is a good reason to tech it into Ruby Amethyst, but it's just an insanely powerful card. You saw what it did this weekend. I think, what was his name again? Oh my goodness, Theo. I think his name was like Theo Time, a very unique name I haven't heard before. Obviously, I've heard Theo, but I think he won on the basis of castles, like in his feature matches. I didn't watch them all fully, but like from when I jumped in on the stream and I saw like him playing, all I saw was like castles on board, and I was like, and like he like be prepared the board and he saw like castle, and I was like, oh yeah, like he probably just wins the game now, right? Because you know it takes you 2 turns to get around locations. What I will say is I do foresee Ravensburger doing 2 things with this game in the near future. One is giving you guys or giving us a card that says like when this card is discarded, like you get some really powerful effect, like wipe the opponent's board with two willpower or less characters or something. So it's gonna like they're gonna have to give us a way to get around things like Bucky. So like if they play a Floodborn and the Bucky forces you to discard and you discard that card, and it says if this card is discarded, your opponent like you just like wipe out their 2 strength or less characters or two willpower or less characters. And the other card I think we'll get is because they know how much of a mistake they made with the first locations released in this game, things like this and RLS Legacy, and how powerful those cards are with their lore generation, the passive lore generation, and their effects. They're going to give us more character-based removal, similar to what we have with Beast Hard-Headed and item-based removal for characters and Benja. They're going to give us that, but for location. So I don't know, we might get like a 3-cost location nuking character, right? Like, and then that's probably like really powerful. So they might give us like a character that says you put this character into play, blow up a location, and like that opponent gets to draw a card or something to balance it out. But I do see those things coming. So for that reason, this card might get balanced out a little bit, might have some counterplay in future sets, but obviously it goes without saying that this is one of the most powerful cards in the game, hands down, right? Like it literally won the DLC this past weekend on June the 8th. Or June the 7th? Because today is the 8th, right? I don't know. What is today? I'm like losing track. Yeah, today is Monday, July 8th. Okay. Next up is Mim Fox. Again, another one where I've constantly called out. This is like, it was the best Amethyst card in the game for a long time until Queen's Castle. Well, I guess only for one set, right? But even when Queen's Castle came out, like, I think Fox was still in a better place than Castle. But Castle over time, as we saw now, is like just insane given the way that the metagame has developed. But this card, yeah, it's steadily gone up since its release. Yeah, it's actually pretty high. I mean, it sucks to say, but like, I mean, I hope you guys have your copies already, because I don't think this card should be worth this. I mean, it's in a starter deck from the second set, but I mean, it is a good card. If you're playing Amethyst, no matter what variation of Amethyst you play, Steel, Ruby, what else is played? I mean, Sapphire isn't played, Amber isn't played. What's the other color? Emerald? Yeah, Emerald. Okay. So Steel, Emerald, and Ruby, you play Fox. Any Amethyst deck I mean, even if you play Sapphire, Amethyst, you're playing Fox. So that's why this card is worth money, right? Because no matter, if you're playing Amethyst, no matter what ink pairing you're putting it with, you're playing Fox. It's just that good of a card. That's why I was saying it literally was the best card in Amethyst. So keep that in mind. This card likely only goes up over time until it gets reprinted or banned or rotated out of the format or something. It is an insanely powerful card. I don't need to go over why it's so good, but I will very briefly. Inkable, 3 cost, very good on curve, a 4 strength, overstated body, still conquest, has rush. And you bounce, which is actually a good thing, especially in the late game where you can bounce back things like Lady Tremaines and Madame Medusas and stuff like that, as well as other cards and other ink pairings. But like obviously in Ruby Amethyst, that's kind of where it gets a lot of its value. So, you know, it remains and will remain one of the strongest cards in Amethyst for a long time to come. I don't think they power creep this card because it's already insanely strong. And if they power creep it, then you have a very, very big problem with this game. So I think this card just ends up getting, you know, staying where it is, or gets rotated out of the format, like I said, with set rotation if they go that way, or just if the ban list is ever introduced, this card gets like limited, semi-limited, something like that, because I do think it is that good. Grab Your Swords, another card that I called out a long time ago when it was like 99 cents, and I was like, I don't understand why this card is so cheap. I know it's in a starter deck from set 1, but it is still a good card. I think this card goes in cycles because people probably think like, whoa, better steel removal is coming out and this card is no good anymore. And it's like, no, non-targeting 2 damage is very strong still. Being sung is very strong still. And mainly because of Sapphire Steel, like this is inkable in Sapphire Steel, right, with Fishbone Quill. This card will... I keep saying it, likely remain in the meta until we get another board, like wide board wiping song that can deal damage without targeting. And the mob song that was introduced, the Sync Together one in Steel, isn't that great. It can deal damage to locations too, though, but it's like 3 damage or something to like 3. No, it's like what? A total, I don't know. It's like 3 damage to 3 different characters and or locations, or 10 damage across 3 characters. And I don't know what it is. But it's not as good as this, basically, is what I'm trying to say. Yes, despite this not hitting locations, it's still very relevant. It takes care of Diablo and Bucky when Diablo is not on the Cove. It takes care of a number of other threats like Flynn Rider, etc. It pairs extremely well in Steel, especially Amber Steel's song, which I know is kind of faded out of the meta a little bit, but just because Robin Hood is so prevalent in Steel decks still, being able to shift Robin Hood and then sing this, you know, in Emerald Steel, Sapphire Steel, I mean, even some of them, I've seen some of this adapting now. It's probably not going to be relevant enough for the store set championships for the rest of this month, but opting to play a more aggro focus build with Robin Hood shift to get whole new worlds and grab your swords off faster, right? Like, it's just a very powerful card overall. So this card is on the rise. With Shimmering Skies coming up, again, if we do get a better Steel song that can deal wide damage and get around things like Ward, this card likely fades away a little bit, but it's still relevant. I don't think it's worth $3 a copy, though. I mean, I said it wasn't worth 99 cents. I said it was worth more than that. So maybe $3 a copy is fair. It's definitely not worth like 6 or 7, which is what it was going for in the first chapter. But again, we had scarcity issues, so it's hard to say. So yeah, I mean, if you don't have these, if you can get them for like $2 to $3, I think that's still a really good deal. If you're someone's asking for like 5 or more, I think that's probably a little too much right now. Zeus, I just picked up a 4th foil copy for $8. I think that this card remains non-power crept. And I think this card remains very relevant for a very long time to come. I could be wrong. We could see this card being power crept, but this is a very effective card. Just because the 5 willpower stat right now is something that is very relevant in the game, hits things like Beast Tragic Hero. It can obviously finish off a lot of things as well, deal a lot of damage into locations. It's kind of that instant deal damage, and your character can finish it off too, right? Things into like Tamatoa or Queen's Castle. And, you know, even like Robin Hood, you can like shoot something into the Robin Hood and then finish it off with this so that it avoids them gaining the lore and getting the card draw, even though they only gain the lore on when they banish on their turn. But if you ended up banishing their Robin Hood on your turn still, they would still get the card draw. This plays around that because it has to be banished in a challenge. So this thing just has a lot of relevant application. And the reason why I've invested in an extra couple of copies, I picked up like 1 non-foil and my 4th foil copy, is because I think they see what the Ruby strength-based removal did to the game in this set, in Ursula's Return, and they're going into Shimmering Skies with characters that have higher strength and less willpower to like balance out the mana cost, right, or the ink cost. And so because of that, I think that Along Came Zeus will get better, because as you see people trying to play these higher strength characters that have lower willpower in order to play around things like Madame Medusa and Brawl and, you know, Ice Block Brawl, that kind of thing. Even though Ruby Sapphire is kind of fading out of the meta a little bit, who knows, it might come back next set as well. Like, I think this card becomes even better next set, but again, who knows, we'll see. That's a little bit of a gamble on my part, but that's kind of what I foresee a little bit from what and I haven't seen all of the reveals, so I could be just like taking a shot in the dark here, but that's kind of what I've seen from the first couple of cards. I think they're focusing a little bit more on strength. Tinkerbell. Okay, so this is an interesting one. I haven't called this, but I did pick up my 4th foil one last week for $20. What are the foil ones going for now? Okay, so less than 20, but I picked it up for 20 Canadian. So this is like what, like 24, 25 Canadian. But yeah, this card is on the rise because, again, probably just where we're at in the meta. This card, I don't know if I would say it has long-term staying power. I mean, you've seen it come back time and time again across 4 different sets. But the reason why it's so effective right now is because people want this to play into the Bucky, right? You want to just play this, deal the 1 damage to the Bucky, similar to what Grab Your Swords does, right? But in character form, and obviously 1 damage, not 2. But it is a very powerful card. What is really underrated, and I think Speci ended up kind of talking about this, and this is something I actually mentioned a long time ago, right? If you watch my Sapphire Steel game videos from like set 3, some of the first ones I built, and I said, you know, this card just doesn't have the same impact unless you shift it, right? Because on the shift, it just provides you so much value. And playing the small tank, and this is what I think Speci ended up showcasing, and I think he won the creators set championship or something. So props to him. But you put that small Tinkerbell on board, and your opponents are just like, oh, I don't want to exert anything, because if you do have the big Tink, like, I'm screwed, right? And if you do have the big Tink, and like if you actually do have it, it's like, yeah, like I am shifting this and it's gonna like wipe out your board most likely next turn. So this card, you know, being played in Sapphire Steel, being played in Emerald Steel as like a 2 or 3 of to a certain degree, right? Just being that top end threat that you can play. That's also a Floodborn. Very, very strong. If this card was a hero, that new song we got, One Last Hope, I think it is, would be ridiculous. And you know what? That One Last Hope song with things like the Simba, because Simba is a hero, which Sapphire Steel plays in the non-Whole New World version, the set 3 super rare Simba from Steel, that when it deals 2 damage, you can draw 2, discard 2, or deal 2 damage. Like, I mean, I know he's not a Floodborn. If he was a Floodborn, that would be like insane. But like, if you're able to do that and then like throw it into a readied character, because the One Last Hope gives your character, if it's a hero, the ability to challenge a readied character, would be ridiculous, right? That would be an insane interaction, because then you could throw Tinkerbell into a readied character and then deal 2 damage to something else. So you can like throw it into a Bucky that's readied. I mean, assuming Bucky's on Cove, you don't take it out when you play this, right? Or, you know, they play a Bucky after the fact that you wipe out the first one with Tinkerbell. And then you just like throw it into the readied character, and then you take out another character for 2 damage. That would be absolutely crazy. But yeah, this card on the rise for that reason. It's proven to be very resilient and a staying force in the metagame. Next set, I do think it's still relevant. I'm not too impressed from what I've seen with the next set. I mean, we'll wait and see what ends up panning out and how certain combos work. But I just think things right now look very expensive for the abilities that they give you, which is actually a good thing. Like, you don't want this game to get too far out of hand too quickly. So I'm rambling though, guys. I don't even know how long this video is, but we've got a lot of cards to review. Next up, we have, we don't talk about Bruno. So this is the other card similar to Be King Undisputed, where I said I think these are very undervalued at $1. I picked up a couple extra copies at $1 because this is Emerald's only form of hard removal to my knowledge. I mean, I know they have Mother Knows Best, but Emerald right now, and maybe for the foreseeable future, is a discard color. And once you've discarded your opponent's hand, they're playing in top deck mode, they're playing with what's on board, right, which could be very strong. But, you know, I've had instances where my opponent has had a Tamatoa on board and they have nothing in their hand, and I'm just like, and, you know, maybe some other characters on board, and I'm like, yeah, Bruno the Tamatoa, which basically means it goes back to your hand and you discard it. What's even crazy and kind of underappreciated and really not like looked at from what I've seen is this card also triggers Prince John, technically, because, like, I mean, I know when you see people play this on stream, they probably just pick up their character and just put it into the discard pile, but it actually goes back to your hand and then you discard that character, right? So, like, there's some interesting interactions with this card in a really heavy focused discard deck beyond Bucky, like Amber Emerald, which I think is a really underrated deck. But yeah, this card I think is a great card as long as discard remains a factor. But like I was saying earlier, I think we will see at some point, maybe not in the next set, but I think for sure Ravensburger will eventually release some very strong anti-discard stuff, because people have been very, very vocal about how they hate playing against discard, because it is really stupid. Like, they introduced this mechanic way too soon into this game, and it's really turned off a lot of people from like wanting to play this game more competitively, which is unfortunate, but it is what it is. But yeah, this card, very good. I think it's underrated. I also think this card is underrated, despite it having 3 strength and me kind of, you know, saying when it was released, like, oh, this card's no good because it gets Medusa. Medusa isn't the be-all, end-all, even though it is very relevant. I think this card is underrated. I think, you know, and the fact that it's a Floodborn means that it pairs, you know, again, with the Emerald Steel Bucky decks if you really wanted to play it in that, because you can sing, like, Let the Storm Rage On with Ursula, Deceiver of All, if you have this on board, and then, you know, pay 2 ink, and then deal another 3 damage. So you're dealing 7 damage and drawing 2 cards. And then you still have this to quest with, which is or challenge, which is crazy. This is also a hero, so if you play the song, geez, I keep saying what I think that song is underrated too. But again, I don't think you should buy it. I think it is that card is only worth $1, but it won't go up. One Last Hope, that's what it is. Sorry, the One Last Hope song. You know, you can make this challenge into a ready character because it's a hero, and that, you know, it gains resist too, but it has 8 willpower. So, like, nothing is taking this out. Like, not even Maui, right? So you can throw this into more or less anything with 3 willpower or less, and it's just like taking it out for free. But yeah, I do really like this card. Like an Amber Steel song, I guess you could technically shift this, but I mean, the singer Ariel is already like super strong anyways, so I don't think you need to shift it. I think this is more of a card you just raw play out, unless we get like a 1-cost Ariel or something that is like a singer 3, like similar to Cinderella. I don't know. Be prepared. This card I think is going to be on the rise again. We've seen the adaptation of this format where people were like, okay, Sisu's out now, we can play 1 Be Prepared. And I think that's been very much squashed. Even in my testing with Pixelborn at the start of the set, before it went down, I actually lost with a Ruby Sapphire deck against a Steel Song deck, because the guy just went like wide, and I'm like, I need to see a Be Prepared. I think I was only playing 2 Sisu at the time though, so if I would have saw a Sisu, I could have wiped out a good portion of his board. But I couldn't wipe out all of it. And he had like flutes up, and he had like 4 characters or 5 characters on board. And I'm like, if I don't see a Be Prepared, I'm only playing 1, right? Because that's what most people were testing at the time. And I'm like, yeah, I don't see a Be Prepared, I just lose. And I think we've seen over time that people are putting back in 3 to 4 Be Prepared. Ruby Amethyst is back on 4. I think Ruby Sapphire is on 3 now. This card, you know, even if it gets ripped out of your hand from Ursula Deceiver, it's like, I only need to see 1. Rip out 2 more from my hand, I don't care. I just need to see and resolve 1, and I likely will win the game. Right, and again, we saw that over the weekend in Bochum, right, with Theo dropping those Be Prepared post Queen's Castle. Like, after he's played Queen's Castle, he drops Be Prepared, wipes out the board, and now he puts his opponent on, yeah, now it's going to take you 2 turns to develop a board to even deal with my castle, and even if you do develop a board, I'm going to drop Tremaines, or I don't know if he was on the Tremaine version, but, you know, Be King Undisputed and Medusas and Brawls and whatever it takes to take out your board, right, or another Be Prepared, who knows. But, yeah, the Queen's Castle with this, very, very powerful interactions. I do think that this card goes back up to over $15. But, you know, there is also that looming set rotation, ban list, limited list. Does that happen? Because despite me constantly talking about how broken A Whole New World is, which I do think it is the more broken card out of these two, this card definitely sees more meta relevant play. And it has kept coming back into the format. People tried to cut this out for Scar, that worked a little bit. Now Scar's out of the format. People tried cutting this out for Sisu, that's didn't work out. They're back on this. Like, this card just comes back time and time again. And what's even crazier, and I think this is really underrated, the song portion. Yes, it gets ripped out of your hand, but if you remember back in set 1, when you would sing this with an Elsa, with a Ursula, Power Hungry, with a Maleficent Dragon, you know, with whatever, that was like a game-winning play because you had all your ink available to continue to develop a board after that. Whereas now we're in such a game, like metagame, where you're hard casting Be Prepared. If we ever get back to a point where you're able to sing this card, you know, especially, and that's why I was experimenting with like Amber Ruby, so that you can like sing this with like that one new Ariel, which I bought 2 full copies of, by the way, which isn't on my market watch, but I do like that card. That's like a tempo swing play. Right? Yes, it's kind of niche, but if you do get that off, it's like super strong. I was talking with a Towel Man Purple, who was the guy that played that spicy Amber Ruby locations deck, and we were trying to tune a list for like songs to protect his locations. And I'm like, yeah, man, like if you get those locations on board and then you actually are able to resolve a Be Prepared, it's like you win the game even harder, like and faster, right? And so we were looking at like what singer combinations could be used. If this card had the Sing Together ability, I would be too strong, right? Because you could sing it with like the new Ursula Vanessa and the Cinderella, because that in total is 7 singer, right? Because they have singer 3, singer 4, so that's kind of crazy. But yeah, we were cooking up some stuff. I don't know if he'll end up well, yeah, best of luck to him. I'm sure he'll end up attending more tournaments. Cool guy. Anyways, next up we got Ariel Treasure Collector. I think that this card is vastly underrated as well. So in testing, this is one of the cards that I think Sapphire may long term play 2 to 3 copies of. In my Sapphire steel, I'm playing 1. The non-Whole New World versions, you play 2 to 3, but I think eventually all Sapphire decks, even the Sapphire Ruby ones, as we get more efficient ramp that you don't have to play a ton of uninkables for, like the How Far All Goes and the One Jumps Ahead, etc. I think you end up playing more copies of this because in the Sapphire item-based decks, well, I mean, the steel version is stronger because you have Fortisphere, which I've talked about this before, that having staying power, like you play the Fortisphere, you draw, versus Sapphire Ruby, which has to play to develop your brain, which isn't an item. Like, yes, you look at 2, but you don't have an item for Hiram, for Tamatoa, for Ariel, etc. But this card represents a tremendous value in the metagame right now because I've talked about this before. Your opponent basically needs Be Prepared, King Undisputed, or Lady Tremaine, with this being the only character on board, in order to out this. They can't Medusa it, they can't Ice Block down, Brawl it, etc., Sisu it, etc. Like, this card, you drop it on board, and in certain game states, like when you know how to play this, and again, the reason it's also better in Sapphire Steel is because it's uninkable, and so you can ink it with Fishbone if it is a dead card. But you drop this on board, you dime it, so you usually only play this after you have the dime on board. You drop this on board, you dime it, you gain 5 lore, usually, right? Because you have more items than your opponent. Then your opponent has to have a very specific non-targeting form of removal since this has ward. Otherwise, even if they're able to develop a super big board or, you know, put game on board for next turn, you're like, okay, well, now during my turn, I'm going to quest for 5 and then diamond again for 5. And so if you have 5 lore ahead of when you play this, you win the game next turn if your opponent doesn't have that very specific non-targeting removal for this card. So this card represents, like, I don't want to say more value than Tamatoa, but potentially more value than Tamatoa because it is a more efficient option to drop and get instant value from. And the thing with Tamatoa is you drop the Tamatoa, you know your opponent's going to remove it next turn. Like, you're like, I'm going to drop this Tamatoa, I'm going to dime it once for like 8, and then I know it's going to get removed next turn. Because if your Tamatoa doesn't get removed, you just win the game, right? But into Ruby decks, you're like, yeah, you have, you know, against Ruby Sapphire, it's like Maleficent Dragon. Against Ruby Amethyst, it's like, you know, the Be King Undisputed, because Tamatoa costs more, so it's likely the only thing you play that turn if you don't have another thing on board, etc. And it just gets targeted and removed, right? It can even get like double ice blocked, Medusa, etc. So, you know, it has its limitations, whereas this card, I think, represents more consistent ways to get your dime off. So I do think that this card long term is worth more than the $1 it's going for. I've picked up 2 foil copies at $6 Canadian a piece, which is around what this market price is here. I do think that I think that this card long term could be worth 15. I mean, I picked up Hirams at foil Hirams for $3 a piece, and I think they're like 25. I picked up foil Fishbones at $6 and $7 a piece, and they're like 30. It's so stupid. This is one of those cards that I think if Sapphire continues to be a meta-relevant force, definitely is worth something long-term. Maui, I'm not going to spend any time here. Like, he's just doing what he needs to do because Ruby is always relevant, and he is a staple in every single Ruby deck you play, similar to how Fox is a staple in every single Amethyst deck that you play. Hiram, speaking of which, we just talked about this. Another starter deck card. I will credit Ravensburger with putting some of their more powerful rare cards that they know are going to be meta relevant into their starter decks. That is a very good thing. It makes these cards much more accessible. Could you imagine if this and Fox were not in a starter deck? They would be worth like $15. They'd be what Maui is basically, because Maui was not in a starter deck, and that's played in every Ruby deck, and that in Maui is like $10-15 Canadian. So the fact that these are still like $4 is pretty good. Like, Hiram is definitely one of the most, I don't want to say broken cards in the game, because he's again one of those cards that you play, you get your draw 2, and he likely dies next turn. If your opponent cannot out the Hiram, if they cannot foresee that you're going to play the Hiram and get the draw 2, or just don't have the out, they didn't draw the out, they don't mulligan for the out to the Hiram if they know you're on Sapphire, in games 2 or 3 or something, you likely win the game, because if this card is able to I'll just say if it's able to draw 4, you likely win the game. Okay, if you're players of equal skill level, etc. So your opponent has to answer this. So for that reason, this card remains one of the best draw engines, if not the best draw engine in the game, because of how much it synergizes with Popsicle and Fortisphere. Even better than the Queen's Castle in terms of a draw engine. The Queen's Castle, I think, is a better overall card because it's a standalone gain 2 lore and potentially draw a ton of cards. But as a draw engine, this is more consistent, right? Because how often with Queen's Castle do you really end up drawing? Not as much as you would like, probably, but it's definitely there as like, hey, I'm gaining 2 lore a turn. Whereas this doesn't do that. But one of the best draw engines in the game for sure. Better than Beast Tragic Hero, in my opinion. I'm trying to think if I'd say that this is better than Diablo. I think it could be better than Diablo, but because Diablo like directly counters this to a certain degree, because you draw 2, your opponent draws 2. But Diablo is a lot easier to out, right? Like, he dies to like almost everything, whereas this at least has 6 toughness, which again gets Maui'd, but the 1 strength also lets it get Medusa, like as we see on screen here, or Brawled, etc. This is another card, though, that I called when it was like $1, and I was like, hey, like I would pick up extra copies of this because this card is basically mini Maleficent Dragon. Because in the metagame, especially the way we've seen it develop now, you don't really see too many threats that are more than 3 strength. They are relevant, like Tamatoas, etc. But in the early and mid game, like Madame Medusa will take out most things. And when you think about again how the game of LORCANA progresses, your opponent is going to be drawing their mid and early game cards later into the game, so they will be playing those cards. And because over half your deck is probably probably over 75% of your deck is 3 strength or less, and therefore Madame Medusa continues to have tremendous value. As we see more and more strength reducing cards come out as well, like there's a lot in Sapphire, there's a lot in Amber, which I think is really under not looked at as much. I think cards like this just become even better. It's already very, very powerful. We've seen it do work in Ruby Amethyst, which doesn't even play any strength reducing cards, but this card went from like under $1 or around $1 to like $3-4 now, and I do think that this only goes up over time. I would not want to pay $5 for a card like this, like 5 Canadian, like $4 USD, but I do think that it wouldn't be the worst if you don't have them. I wouldn't be buying them to flip necessarily, like I would have been at $1. Not that I really do that all too often, but at $4, I think it's still a decent value for what you get. I don't really see a card like this getting power crept too hard. It's going to be interesting, though, to see what continues to happen with Ruby, because what other kinds of removal are they going to give us for Ruby? Because that's what Ruby is, right? Ruby just is removal, and are we just bound to get more and more powerful removal? Like, what are you going to do? Power creep this card? Give us a 7-cost uninkable 5/4 that banishes 4 strength or less characters? Like, what's going to come next, right? I don't know. They can't give us too much Ruby removal because the color is just leveraged too strongly with other ink pairings, right? I don't know. The game is in a weird place. I don't know what they're going to do with us for Ruby, but we'll see. That's kind of where we're at with this. This is another card that I think is a little bit of... Oh, it's already on the up. Okay. Yeah, I was going to say, this is another sleeper, I think. I'm going to probably pick up a couple of foil copies at $6 a piece if I can. Canadian. I think that's good value. That's about what the market price is right now. I have one foil copy for my set 1 foil set, but I would like 4. I don't see this or Lilo getting power crept as a 1-drop in those ink colors. And those 2 ink colors do very well with aggro strategies, better than Emerald in my opinion, even though Emerald is an aggro color. I just don't like the understatedness of Emerald. Like, I like Curse Merfolk because, you know, the 1 strength versus 0 strength doesn't really matter comparing this to Curse Merfolk. But I do think, you know, and I think, again, Speci showcased that this card is coming down when we've seen the format shift towards a control-heavy meta. Like, these aggro decks can go under the radar. When you have like an aggro / mid-rangey kind of deck, getting this early lore very quickly and then closing the game out with some mid-range options is an effective strategy into control meta. So having this for whenever the meta shifts to a control meta, hopefully you guys understand what I'm saying. Like, this could be a good option. So if you don't have these, I mean, at $4 for a normal, I mean, the foil one is only $1. I would just get the foil ones if you can get them. I would just get them right now before they jump even further. Because I don't think this is like a Hiram discrepancy where you have like Hirams at 4 and then the foil versions of Hiram at like 25. I think, you know, this might go up to like $10 for a foil one, let's say. So if you get them for a couple bucks cheaper, even if you want to flip them later on, if you have your non-foils and you're content with using that, I think that's cool. I think the foiling on this one does look really nice though, so I wouldn't mind picking them up when I can. Tamatoa, this is a card again, another one I've called when it was like at $2 or less. I've gone through so many of these. I have 4 foils and 4 non-foils, but this card I've called many times saying like this is a card that just gets better over time. It's very unlikely to get power crept. This is just a very, very powerful card, and it has an insanely strong stat line. So a 5/8 doesn't get hit by Zeus, Medusa, Brawl. You know, it has to be like a Maleficent Dragon, a Be Prepared, or, you know, a very niche card, which, you know, Amber decks were teching in specifically for Tamatoa and Maleficent Dragon in the Ruby Sapphire match in World's Greatest Criminal Mind in order to out this card. You've seen this card come down, be dimed for like 10, you know, get an item back on play, so the enter the battlefield effect is very strong, and then if it survives and you quest with it, not only are you going to gain a ton of lore based on your items, but you get to recur another item, which is just like an instant infinite Hiram draw engine if you have Hiram on board as well. I mean, at that point, it's just to win more. You're winning the game anyways, but this card just continues to show why it's so relevant. Played in Ruby Sapphire and Sapphire Steel, of course, a card that just continues to go up over time because similar to what happened with Ruby Amethyst in set 2 when Merlin and Mim were introduced, those cards have proven to just not be power crept out of the format yet. I don't think Tamatoa and Sapphire decks, as long as Sapphire remains meta relevant, gets power crept out of the format. I think this Lucky Dime Tamatoa strategy, like I was talking about with Ariel too, like it just gets better over time because we're going to get more items in Steel, in Ruby, in Sapphire that are going to make this card better. Similar to like Ariel Spectacular Singer from set 1. The more powerful songs we get, the better that cards get for scrying. Same with Ursula Deceiver of All. That card has actually hit a record low, I think, right now in terms of like since it hit meta relevance, right? It's like $35 Canadian. It's like that card just gets better as we get better 3-cost songs. So you got to pay attention to these generically good cards like Diablo, a generically good card. Beast Trudge Hero, generically good card. What I will say about Beast and Diablo is I think these cards go down over time, which this one's already trending down because they're so susceptible to removal. And we will likely see counterplay options against very powerful cards like this. Like Beast is just, you know, you put any kind of damage on him and he's just becomes a big body and he doesn't draw anymore, right? But if you do get the draw engines off with Beast, he can be a game-ending card, right? Because you get that card advantage over your opponent. Diablo, we've seen his power on shift, you know, the ability to just match the draw. Basically, I don't want to say shut off your opponent's draw, but, you know, if they have Rabbit, if they have Castle they're drawing off of, if they have Hiram, etc., you're drawing cards with them, Rapunzel, etc., you're drawing cards with them. And these kind of cards are very, very strong. That's why they're demanding such a big price and why they're so meta relevant. But again, they are very susceptible for 2 specific counterplay options. Like you've seen people tech in Fire the Cannons and Steel Babooms, etc. Brawls are played at 4 specifically because of Diablo. Brawl is still a great card, but it gets even more value in Ruby because of Diablo. And this is kind of the problem we have in this game right now, where you don't really see any decks other than X and Ruby or X and Steel because you need the removal options. And so the game is in a very weird place where you're only really seeing those 2 ink pairings kind of come to the top of the metagame because you need them. Like if you don't play one of those 2 ink pairings, you're not winning because you just have no answers to the board. So I hope Ravensburger fixes that somehow. I don't know how. Sisu Empowered Sibling is a card that's on the decline, so as expected, with it really only being played now in Ruby Sapphire, it's still a very powerful card. You know, it is a 5 questing body. It does get hit by a Zeus, but it doesn't get Madame Medusa, Brawled, etc. on the opposing Ruby matchups. I did call this with my friend though, because when this card first came out, it was like $20, and he picked up his copies, and he was like, I knew this card was going to be good, and I'm like, yeah, man, it definitely is good. And I think, you know, I said it wasn't going to be that good, so I ate my words on that one. But I said I don't think it's worth like 35 or whatever it ended up going to after the meta relevance. And I said, you know what, I bet you I'll be able to pick up my copies for cheaper. I picked up foil ones at 37, and then I picked up my first non-foil one at $20. So it went back down to what he paid for it on release. And sure enough, that's kind of where it's at, $20 Canadian. The foil one definitely fell off quite a bit. Like I said, I paid like 37 Canadian for mine, which I think even in shops, in Canadian shops right now, like they're still going for that price, funnily enough, even though the foil one here is like 30 Canadian. 22 USD, it might be like 30-ish Canadian. But yeah, I mean, I wish I could have got it for that price. That would have been dope. Still a very good card though. I think, honestly, guys, like, this is another one I'm going to try to call here. After playtesting and experimenting with this a little bit, again, in combination with Sapphire or Amber, this card, I think, is really, really strong. And it could be a card, as we see, again, more meta-relevant 2 strength or less characters come out. If Ice Block remains part of the meta, these strength-reducing cards in Amber and Sapphire, you know, still become, like, playable cards in a strategy. This card, especially because it's a shift, is still very relevant, especially in Sapphire, because you can ink it off Fishbone or any other future, you know, ink cards we get from Sapphire that allow you to ink on inkables. I mean, even in green, right? Even in Emerald, you have the hidden Inkcaster, which can ink this. But yeah, I think this card, low key, is worth picking up if you can get it for like maybe 15, $20 Canadian, I would say, if you don't have them already. Again, this could be like another Jafar call for me, where this card just ends up tanking and not being relevant, especially if it gets power crept. But I really don't see this card being that bad, and I don't see it being power crept directly. Yeah, I'm just trying to think, like, the Ursula Power Hungry, was that card really power crept? Not really. It just kind of faded out of the meta because of something like Brawl and this card, right? Like, could you imagine playing Ursula Ursula Power Hungry, and then your opponent next turn drops a Sisu Empowered Sibling? You're just like, great. Right? So I think we're still a ways away from this getting power crept, and it still will be relevant for a while, but it's something to keep in mind and keep an eye on. Curse Merfolk, I'm just throwing this up here because I said to pick this up when it was like $1. Again, it's kind of come down because I don't think we really see the return of Emerald as an aggro color unless we get very specific anti-discard strategies, which again I've talked about in this video already. But I would not pay like $4 or $5 for this card. Unless you really do want to play an aggro focus deck, and that is your deck to go to. I think there are better variations of Emerald that you can play, mainly the discard variations, which, you know, this card discards a card when it's challenged. I just think that it doesn't provide enough benefit for you. Like, your opponent might be like, I don't care, I'll just challenge it and get it off the board, gain the board presence advantage, and discard something that's not relevant, like discard a Lucky Dime, because I'll just get it back with Tamatoa later if I can get back into this game, right, or something. So, like, I could discard a King Undisputed because it's uninkable and it's just sitting in my hand. I'm not going to play it for like 10 turns anyways, you know. So it's kind of like that. I don't think this card has as much value as it maybe once did. A Whole New World is another card to kind of keep an eye on. We've seen, obviously, things like Diablo is a good counterplay option to this, but again, Steel plays a lot of the pinging removal to deal with Diablo before you play this, obviously. This is definitely my #1 target to see on a ban list, if a ban list ever does come, or a limited list. And if that happens, this card loses a ton of value, because being able to wheel cycle is, you know, Sapphire Steel is basically based around that. Amber Steel Song is based around this card. 2 deck archetypes are based around this card. Yes, I know there's a non-Whole New World version of Sapphire Steel, but the Whole New World version, in my opinion, is definitely way stronger when you're an intelligent player who knows how to use this. And I'm not saying people who don't use a Whole New World are not intelligent. I'm just saying, and this card could be very, very bad, don't get me wrong. But in certain scenarios, when you know how to use it correctly, and I don't even know how to use it perfectly, this card is game breaking, and it wins you the game. Like, in set 1, when somebody would like turn 3 shift Stitch and sing a Whole New World, and I was playing Ruby Amethyst, and I played like 3 cards, and I still have a full hand, and my opponent like dumped like half their hand all their hand on the board basically, and sings a Whole New World, I'm like, yeah, I just lose because you plus like 6 off of that. Like, okay. In the Sapphire version, it's a little bit more tame because you, first of all, don't play an aggressive shift line. I mean, unless you're playing Robin Hood, but you don't really play that in Sapphire Steel. But like I was saying earlier, you might see that now. But you're converting, instead of like board presence, you're converting ink into card advantage, right? So you'll be on like 7, 8 ink. Your opponent will be on like 4 ink or something. And then you'll whole new world. So the extra 3 cards from your hand that you were inking with Fishbone Quill turn into a fresh 7, your opponent gets a fresh 7, and you guys continue playing the game. The difference is you have more ink to play more interactions to manage the board state. So this card, I think, continues to be a very powerful card that will continue to go up unless it's rotated or banned out of the format. I do not really see this card going down in price. That being said, though, I don't know if there are that many skilled players out there that will be willing to pick this card up and play whole new world decks. And for that reason, the card might not spike up much either. I picked up 1 extra foil copy. I would like to get a playset of foils. I missed out on getting another one for 25, unfortunately. But if I can get 2 more at 25 a piece, I'd probably pick them up just to complete a foil playset. So that's on my radar. You know, $14. If you can get it for like 14 Canadian, I would say that's kind of fair. The lowest I think I saw this go to was 7. I picked up one for $5.70 from a shop after like a not Canada Day, some kind of holiday discount. And I think that's the lowest, because it was like $7 originally, and then I got like an extra like $1.50 off or something. That's the lowest I've ever seen it. So if you can pick this up for like $12 to $14 Canadian, I don't think that that's a bad price. Again, unless this card gets banned or limited, then you know those strategies like Sapphire Steel and Amber Steel kind of fall apart a little bit. But I don't really see Ravensburger releasing cards that directly counter a whole new world. Like, I know that Tiana came out and prevents you from playing this, but you know that card doesn't see play. Diablo can punish you for playing this. Prince John technically can punish you for playing this if you have cards to discard with it. Sheriff of Nottingham, right? So there are these cards that, like, you know, can directly punish you for something like this, but they don't see play. I mean, except for Diablo, right? And again, with Diablo, you don't play this if the Diablo is exerted on board. You out the Diablo first, or you play it before it exerts. So, like, there's not much that you can really do to help to like counterplay this card as a developer, because the card is so powerful. I mean, there's a reason why it was an MTG first and it was banned. And again, like I said, an intelligent player will always find a way to crack the code on this card. Like, you know, Amber Steel Song, dump my hand on board and, you know, just sing this as early as possible for disruption. Sapphire Steel, just ink my hand as quickly as possible on my last card, sing a whole new world, draw into a fresh 7, you know, I have the ink advantage, I have maybe the board advantage too, and I just win the game from there. So, yeah, it's hard to say, but this card, I think, is one to watch. I don't know if I would say, like, pick up a lot of extra copies. I definitely wouldn't say that, but you know, if you want your play set, if you don't have it already, I don't think it's at a bad place if you can get it for a little bit cheaper than the current market rate. But again, it's always a risk of the card to be banned, in my opinion. One of the cards that I think is really underrated is the Queen Diviner. I was really off of this card when I was looking at the start of the set, and I was like, yeah, Scuttle is just way better. But in hindsight, this is definitely a build-around card. And I don't think we've seen this being too represented. I think there's been a couple of spicy builds of like Ruby Sapphire that have used this. But the fact that this card can get like a number of items, and as we get more and more 3-cost items, this card just gets, again, better and better over time, similar to Ariel. The issue is it has to wait a turn to exert and see the items. I haven't played them yet, but I've been building decks in like the app where I use like Sapphire Steel and put bodyguards on board to protect this card potentially, and just try to get as many items on board and then close the game out with Dime, right? Like, because that's what Sapphire decks do anyways. So like, can this card accelerate that potentially? I know Moyen was cooking up a list on Ruby Sapphire with this card, which can be very strong, because one of the key reasons why you can play this card and it's so effective is because you can reveal a Maurice's Workshop potentially off of it, and Maurice's Workshop comes into play exerted, but it doesn't need to exert to draw. You just pay 1 to draw. So, you know, if you play this on 3 and then on 4 you exert and look at the top 4, you hit a Maurice's Workshop. If you play that Maurice's Workshop for free, if you play like a Popsicle, you pay, you know, 2. So you pay 1 for Popsicle, 1 for the Maurice's Workshop, and you draw 2 cards. So, because you have all your ink available still, right? You play the Maurice's Workshop for free. Doesn't matter that it's exerted. Of course, it can hit like Fishbone Quill, Greatstone Dragon, which comes into play exerted anyways. Popsicles, Fortispheres, Vitalis Spheres. It can hit a lot of different things. Shields, Maui's Fishhook, etc. It just hits a lot. And as soon as those items hit the board, it's like, yeah, free advantage, right? So I do think this card is underrated. I do have 3 foil copies. I will probably look at picking up my 4th foil one if I can get it for around $10, which is what they're going for. Because I do think long-term this card could be good. Again, could be completely irrelevant. You know, I was hyped up on Snow White, and that card ended up falling flat as well. The second one, like the Jafar, I guess. And even though I didn't say to buy Snow Whites, but I did say, you know, getting the Jafars would probably be good. I could be wrong with the Queen, but I think it's a safe enough bet given the price that it's at right now for a Legendary that it's worth picking up even the non-foil copies for. Tuk Tuk, this is definitely a card that I would say I would pick up, especially if it's like 50 cents. And the foil ones are like $1. I picked up a couple of foil ones to complete. I think I have 3 foils actually. I think I need one more. But yeah, like at $1, $1.50, like this card is actually insane. Again, if you've seen Towelman Purple's match in the CCS where he was playing Amber Ruby locations, this card, you know, just dropping, moving 2 things to this and another character to an RLS Legacy, this and another card to Tiana's Palace. It's just like really, really strong. It's evasive as well, so it challenges into the Diablo. It's just a very versatile card, I think, and it's so cheap. Like if you don't have your copies, this is like a, you know, a Cursed Merfolk, a Queen's Castle that I'm calling out early. This is a very good card. This is a very, very good card. I don't see it getting power crept because again it has a very niche ability, and locations have proven to be very strong. Will we continue to see powerful locations? I doubt it, but if we do get that like 1 or 2 really good location that can go into Ruby, this card is extremely, extremely strong. Holy crap, this video is long. When are we going to end? Okay, Ariel Spectacular Singer. I've already called this out. Same reason as Tamatoa. As we get more and more songs, this card just becomes better. Amber Emerald, obviously Amber Steel Song, if it ever comes back into the format, plays this. At $4, I think that's fine. Foil ones are definitely on the rise. They're actually coming down. I might look at picking up a couple of foil ones because I don't have a playset yet. But, you know, staple card since Chapter 1. Very good option if you don't have them yet. Cogsworth, wow, the foil ones have really spiked. I picked these foil ones up for $6.99, I think. But yeah, it's crazy to see they're at like 20 Canadian. Again, only played in Sapphire Steel, but it is like the Sapphire Steel decks, when you see people name their deck list, is literally called Cogsworth and Friends, because that's how important Cogsworth is in the deck. So you do need this if you're attempting to play Sapphire Steel. Other than that, though, I really don't think this card is worth all that much because, again, it gets hit by Sisu, it gets hit by Under the Sea, and yeah, it is still like this card is, in my opinion, like an auto win against Steel to a certain degree, because like Steel, once this hits the board, Steel is just like, okay, all of my damage spells are like useless now because I'm dealing like 1 less, and like every time I cast a damage spell, it's 1 less. So like, you know, 3 Let the Storm Rages On, instead of doing 6 damage, it does 3. Right, so it's a really good card for Steel matchups. So if you're in a Steel heavy meta, this is a card you probably want to play and play Sapphire. But other than that, I really don't see this card being worth this much money. Yeah, this card should be like $2 in my opinion because it's really only playing in 1 meta relevant deck. I don't really see. Well, I mean, I can't say that because we don't know what the next set brings. But from what I've seen so far, I don't see this card really branching out with Sapphire into other decks, especially not Sapphire Ruby, which is really the only other thing that Sapphire is played with. Because again, you only really play X and Steel or X and Ruby, and Sapphire only goes with those 2 colors right now. So it's like if you don't play either one of those, it's like neither here nor there. Flynn Rider Frenemy is a card I'd like to call out. I purchased a couple of extra copies of the non-foil one. Crazy to see the foil one going up to here. I mean, I guess you wouldn't really need a play set. I only have 2 foil ones, which I guess is all you really play. But if you're if you're going to continue to play, or we continue to see a discard heavy meta, this is a card that is a closer for discard, and so you will need copies of this. I do think as we get further and further away from Floodborn, you know, Rise of the Floodborn set, the second set in the game, this card becomes worth more. If this card ends up phasing out of the meta, this card just phases out with it. But I think people will start to realize that, you know, this card is extremely important in the discard matchup because this card will end you the game very quickly before your opponent can get back into the game. If you watch Zan play Emerald Steel on streams or in his videos, you see that he uses this card to great effect. He'll be in a position that looks like he's losing, but because he has the Flynn Rider, his own biggest fan on board, he's actually winning the game, and he does win the game. So this card very important for discard strategies. I think we're coming to the end here, though, guys. Strength of a Raging Fire. So this is another flex. I called out this card dropping, and I said I don't understand why this card is dropping, because it is a very good and versatile card. It is a 3-cost card that potentially has limitless upside. You can deal as much as, like, 6, 7, 8 damage to something directly. It's double sung by Ursula, Deceiver of All. It's still played in Amber Steel Song, and it's inkable. You will not see a card as versatile as this come out for a very long time, I don't think, because again, it's a very niche effect. It can be played in like Amethyst Steel. It can be played in any steel deck, basically, right? It's obviously played in Emerald Steel, which is probably the reason why it's going up. But yeah, I called out buying this card when it was literally at its low point, because people thought like, oh, Zeus is going to replace this. It's like, yeah, to a certain degree it might, but this card is inkable and it's 3. It gets sung by Cinderella. It gets it can be inked. Zeus can be inked, right? So it's just, you got to pay attention to these factors when you're looking at things, and sometimes it does make sense why things are dropping. But you watch other people's market watches, you watch my market watches. We should be able to explain to you guys like why is this happening? Does it make sense? What are we seeing? Because the people who are doing these market watches, like I think LORCANA Goons is another one who does them. I don't watch his too often because I'm so busy, but obviously he's a very, very good player, so you should be watching his, and he should probably be able to give you a lot of insights as well as to why something is good or what should be worth picking up or why something is moving. And this is one of those cards that was just like, why was it declining? You should have been picking this up. Okay, we definitely are coming to the end here. I just picked up my second foil copy of this today, Monday night, and I do think that this card may not necessarily be super meta relevant in the future, but this is one of those cards where I just look at the card. 4/7 right now, very good stat line. Shift 5, Ursula, we've seen a number of playable Ursulas. While you don't necessarily want to overlap this with Deceiver of All, you do still have the purple challenger Prince Eric Ursula, or Prince Eric clone of Ursula from Steel. You have the obviously Emerald Deceiver, regular Deceiver, 2 cost, comes in, rips a song from the opponent's hand. And we probably get some more Ursulas, maybe in other colors. We have Amber Ursulas as well. Not that you'd really see this in an Amber deck, but this card, the effects are very, very strong, right? Shutting down songs from, singing of songs, and then exerting characters. And then it quests for 3 as well. So when you quest, you exert a character. So you don't even have to like tap it to exert. You can still get your lore and exert, and then use another card to take out what you exerted. A very, very strong card overall. It's just very expensive. You did see Jordan Moore come second place in Chicago with Emerald Amethyst, and honestly, if he was up against any other deck other than Emerald Steel, and even though he went up against that deck, he still only lost in 3. He still took a match off of Emerald Steel. Of course, he was on the play during that match, but if he would have went first, like if he was the higher seed and got to go first for 2 out of the 3 matches, he might have ended up taking the whole tournament with this deck, right? With Emerald Amethyst, with the 3 Ursula Sea Witch. I think he was running 3, or Ursula Sea Witch Queen. Like, that's how crazy this card can be in Emerald Amethyst. Not that he was using this card to win games with, but I'm sure there was a number of times where this card came up as the shift on the 2-drop Ursula, and you were just like, yeah, quest for 3 now and exert your character, and I have a 7 willpower body on board and you can't answer this, so that means I'm going to quest for 3 next turn again, and like you can't sing songs now. And it's just like, holy crap, where did that come from? Because 2-drop Ursula is very unassuming. You're like, yeah, you ripped your song, you got your value out of it now, or you didn't rip a song and it's a useless card, you just played it, looked at my hand, and then you drop this on top of it, and your opponent's just like, oh, I was not expecting that, right? Very good card. So yeah, I picked up 2 non-foils at around $10 each. Probably overpaid for them, but I think that this card will come good. But I don't know, man. Amethyst cards, I just love them because it's a control color, and I said that about Jafar, and I was wrong. I picked up the foil ones of this. I picked up one for 17 Canadian, and I think I picked up the other one for 20. So again, I don't mind overpaying if that is even overpaying right now, because I do love the card anyways. It's amazing artwork regardless. So I'm happy with them. Jim Hawkins, I would pick up if it's like, yeah, it's already on the rise again, but under $10. I think I called this card being expensive at first, and it was, and then I called it dropping once we saw RLS Legacies not being as impactful as we thought they would, because this was played in Ruby Amethyst at the beginning of Into the Inklands, and then it was really just cut out as people just valued the efficiency and the aggro strategies more. But I do think, and I did call this in my early Market Watch videos, I said, as we get more powerful locations, which, again, I know I'm talking pretty fast, but I'm trying to wrap this up because I'm pretty sure we're like well over an hour now, but if we do end up getting more powerful locations, this card just becomes better over time. And again, you've seen Talisman Purple's incredible location Amber Ruby deck and how strong that can be. So Jim Hawkins, definitely worth picking up. Bare Necessities at under $1, I'm picking up copies. I only have 3 foil ones, but This card, I think, is insanely powerful. Amber is really the next color, in my opinion, to get some really banger cards, because that color has really gotten the shaft since like set 1. In set 1, it was the best deck with Amber Steel for sure. It ended up overtaking Ruby Amethyst, in my opinion. But since then, like, it's really faded away. Like, yes, it was around in set 2 and set 3, but it wasn't nearly. I mean, it did win Leal, right? Frank Karsten did win with Amber Steel Song, but it didn't really get like that many good support options. And of course, in Ursula's return, Amber is basically non-existent. So I do think that this is a color that gets some really good options, potentially in the next set or in the very near future. And I think this card is always going to be a meta-relevant card, always. The ability for 2 inkable, can be sung, can be inked. Look at your opponent's hand, super good effect right there. Just look, let me see what I'm working with, and then rip a card that's a non-character. Location, item, song, action, doesn't matter. Super strong card. Okay, again, old MTG players, Duress, right, comes to mind. Very strong. Okay, we finally reached the end. I doubt any of you made it to the end of this video. If you did, drop a like. I might do a giveaway for those. Drop a comment. Don't mention in the comment that I'm doing a giveaway, but I might do a giveaway for those of you who comment. Just say, hey, I made it to the end of the video, right? And let me know. Make a comment about one of the last 5 cards I commented on in the comment, and I might do a giveaway for something decent, let's say. So I'll message you somehow, either in the comments. And if you made it to the end of this video, just again, leave a quick comment. But hey, I made it to the end of the video. I liked how you talked about one of the last 5 cards. Whoever's reading the comments, unless they made it to the end of the video, they won't understand. So just say like, hey, I liked how you talked about bare necessities and this relevant fact about it or something, or opinion. And I see that. I know you made it to the end of the video and you watched it. And hopefully you didn't skip through the video and got to the end. But like, yeah, I might do a giveaway to just like reward the most loyal people, because this is a long one. Maybe you were listening to this as a podcast, you were cooking your food or doing something. Anyways, I'm rambling. Let's wrap this up, guys. Hopefully you found this helpful as a Market Watch post Bokum DLC and into the store set championship month. We will see these prices overall dip, I think, until we see what people potentially think are going to be good into the next set. But prices will likely overall dip as, everyone likely starts to offload what they don't need anymore for store set championships. In the prior weeks, people were buying up stuff in preparation for what they wanted to play for store set championships, and of course the challenges. But we will see that cool off a little bit. So a lot of these prices will still fluctuate to a certain degree. But in general, I've done my best to try to explain things from what I've seen and from what I know. Maybe I'll be right, maybe I'll be wrong. We'll see. But like I said, a little bit of a flex in this video, going over a couple of options that we called correctly in the past. Thank you again for watching, though. Quantum is out.